Hello, we're back to the introduction of what is singular reasoning and why should anyone even care. We're moving our way through time. We've covered really in the current modern history, Aristotle setting some standards. Everyone who's studied history knows that there's been plenty of great people before Aristotle. And he's just a turning point for a conversation piece, a piece to establish where language and communications through the written form, mathematics, and the words were really one form at one time. You know, where pi was the number 5 in ancient Greek. We lost that abstract and literal meaning in one symbol, and everything was broken into two basic functions. A number being literal and a letter being abstract. And I'm making the assumption that this happened in a final sense through the introduction of a 9-digit counting system with a 0 as a placeholder by Indian and Muslim scholars. So, what are we left with then? What does all this mean? Why am I wasting my time watching this guy's idiot video and all this other fun stuff? Well, what it means is that there's certain problems that mathematics can no longer solve. So, we're given a basic understanding of mathematics. And that, you know, if you see an object, one object, and you see another object, you add them together, you kind of have two objects. It was a very, very simple, great way of counting your perceived reality. The problem is that there's certain situations where you know things are occurring, but this formula and this solving system doesn't actually function properly. And that happens when you talk about things like reproduction. Things that we know are occurring, things that are coming into our world, into our lives, that come from nothing. The biggest example of that impacts us daily is the birth of a child. So where we would have a situation where we would see one mom and we would see one dad and they performed an action of reproduction, the problem is the sum of that equation is 3 objects. The third object is the baby. So in the sense of reproduction, 1 plus 1 equals 3 objects. Now, this is where all the physicists go absolutely crazy and go, that's what we talk about. We talk about the abstract and all this other stuff. But the problem is that even physics is diagnosed through a polar reasoning system, and it's very, very swayed through perception. And a lot of our great founders in physics and even our currents are wrong, basically. So, we'll get to that physics part later, but back to the basic mathematics and why mathematics is failing us. So we have a problem now. So we have a world that we live in that we have a system to validate scientific equations. That's mathematics. 1 plus 1 equaling 2. But now we know that this no longer covers everything that impacts us. How do we account for things that are very abstract? So this is where I am proposing the hypothesis that the way we learn things, the way we understand them, the way we're taught them is flawed. We have a system that separates things into polar ideologies, basically driving us to perceive things like, let's say, time, as a variable that is 2 polar positions. There's a past, and then there's a future. We have an abstract of a now that is bouncing around somewhere in the middle. Now, we're trained in the core of our language, the core of our understanding of the world, to derive things into polar ideologies now. The relative and the abstract. The abstract no longer has any value. We've completely destroyed that capacity to have it speak to us and have any meaning. We only live through scientific discovery, through mathematic process, but mathematic process cannot process what is not there but we know occurs. Theologians raise their hands and go crazy. This is where our Bible will give us our answers and all these other jazz, and the religions come running in, and folks like Stephen Hawking try to come up with concepts to fill in gaps that are based, unfortunately, in polar reasoning. Polar reasoning applied to time. Now, time is the biggest factor that we can come across. So I'm going to come into the next chapter with time and discuss it properly, and I'll show it from a singular reasoning. Object of time was driven this way because it is something that is singular. Time is one object. we unfortunately break it apart into two polar positions to understand it. This is what I'm getting at. This is what we need to avoid when we're diagnosing problems that are truly singular. If you have any questions about this work, you can get more of the information at singularreasoning.com. I definitely recommend reading my thesis paper first. The abstract book, entitled Everything, Pen Name Logos, is a manual to teach the mind how to think. Sentence structure is very abstract, makes you hold words longer, all this other jazz. I'm giving the cut it sign, so have a good day, and I'll see you soon.